I'm so happy to be here. I was actually at the photography show 2 years ago presenting live, which was a wonderful experience, and I'm excited to be back. So today we're going to talk a bit about pitching, which has definitely changed over the last year as we've shifted into this new world following the pandemic and all of the aftermath that has resulted in not only our businesses, but our personal lives, the way we connect with people, the way we present ourselves to others, the way we're living in this highly digital world. And I'm sure for many people who are now operating pretty much completely remotely, it has affected the way that you speak with clients, the way you're able to do your jobs. And I wanted to talk today and cover a number of different ways that we can adapt into this world and still find the connectivity and still find unique ways to present ourselves when we're going out there, especially with the amount of noise that is currently on the internet. How do you make yourself stand out? How do you prove that you're the right person for the job? How do you direct people to your website and to your company and to your presentation after you make your pitch to make sure that they stay with you and start building lasting relationships with you? So I believe the presentation, there we go, is going to be up. We're going to just start with a little quote that I love because I think it's kind of sums up exactly how you need to approach the topic of pitching under any circumstances in life. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So the whole idea with pitching is pitching equals passion. So whatever you're doing when you're pitching a project, it has to come from a really authentic, genuine, passionate place. So whatever you're selling, you'll sell it 1,000 times better if you genuinely love and believe in your product. And in this case, for the majority of the people who are watching this presentation, the product is you. So it's very, very hard to sell yourself. It's always easier to go in and pitch someone else's project or pitch someone else's proposal. But in these cases, really all you have is you, especially when you're in a situation where maybe you're pitching via Zoom. You're not able to necessarily go out into a coffee shop or go into an office or have people come into your space and see the other work that you've done. So the big thing that you want to focus on first is finding this passion. Not only the passion that you have, but also the passion of your potential client. So whether they're coming to you from a wedding business, you're going to be dealing with a lot of clients, I'm sure, in this year and the year to come who've had their weddings or their special events postponed. So they're in a bit more of a fragile state. They might be a little bit stressed about how they've had to repivot. They've maybe had to compromise on a lot of their visions for this particular event, whether it is a wedding or maybe a graduation or perhaps just a general birthday party that has now been pushed back. These are really important things to consider as you're approaching these clients because they're already coming to this event with a bit of either maybe a jadedness or maybe they're upset or maybe they're not necessarily in the place they thought they would be. So you have to be able to bring this passion to the project that makes them get excited about it again. So a little thing that I like to do before meeting with a client or pitching a project is making a list of kind of 3 things that I know I'm bringing to the table. So right now, if you're sitting home and you have a little notebook nearby or you have your phone, you open up your apps, just jot off 3 adjectives that you think are your strongest selling points. So maybe you're very outgoing and very energetic and well spoken, so you know that you're always going to present yourself well. Maybe you are highly empathetic and you find really good ways to connect with people on a deeper level and you find that people really open up to you when you meet with them. Maybe you're extremely creative and great with thinking outside the box, so you know that anybody who comes to you with any sort of project, you're going to be able to bring a new and unique angle that probably nobody else would think of. So just take a moment, jot a few things down. Then I want you to think about what questions you're going to ask your client to find out what their passions, what those 3 things that are unique about them. So are you going to focus maybe on something with their family, if it's something family oriented, if you're doing portrait sessions, if you're capturing something out in nature, so maybe you're working for more of a corporate project, what are the 3 words, what's their mission statement, what do they define themselves as? And start finding and putting together this big picture of what you're going to be discussing before you even get into the pitch. So what you want to be doing is building this energy, this passion, that the second you start going into this conversation, they can feel your passion and it becomes contagious. And that's really the best way I mean, maybe not in these times to use the word contagious, but that's definitely the best way to kind of launch into your pitch without launching into a sell. So you're not selling yourself. You have to think of it as, how am I going to spark something between us that now their passions start coming clear to me and my passion becomes very clear to them, because that will make them remember me. That will make them remember my proposal. That will make them want to work with me because we had this great chemistry from the second that we met. So that's a big way to start any presentation, any project. I mean, even beyond just pitching, but in the entire span of your career, once you're in the room and you're working on the project, that passion has to follow you throughout. So whatever your first impression passion is, you want to make sure you're carrying that with you into the next stages of your presentation, of your project, of your job, and they will remember that and they will pass that on to the next people that they recommend you to. So listen, I think that there is a very difficult time now with the way that we're interacting. A lot of it's via Zoom or via just regular phone calls or these conference calls. And the art of listening is kind of lost, because sometimes you're in a room such as this and you have 3 different people. And yes, people are supposed to be on mute, but there's not that accountability where you're really looking at someone face to face and able to like capture their body language, capture their attention properly. You can't control what's going on in their circumstances around them, and if a kid runs in the room or if their dog needs to go out or if their internet connection goes wild. So I think this is a big issue that people have started to encounter in a lot of their professional lives, is how do we really stay focused and stay paying attention to the project at hand. So a big thing is for you, you want to be on the defense of this conversation. You want to be listening to what they're saying. Have questions prepared, know exactly, what you need to capture out of this to come up with a complete proposal, whether it's financially, what their budget is, if they have any references. I always love to ask clients, send me websites, send me videos, send me photos, give me a sense of what you have and you're picturing, because it's very hard, obviously, to go into someone's mind and know exactly what it is. And a lot of times people say things or describe things in a certain way, and then you do the project and they're like, well, I really wanted this. And you look at what they say they wanted and it is nowhere near what you had in your mind. So listening, knowing the questions to ask, and then really asking more questions on top of that. Repeat back the things that they're saying so that you make sure they know what they've just said and they're not just kind of spitballing ideas that aren't actually what they have in mind. So after you absorbed all of the information, after you've gotten all their answers, repeat it back to them. So I'm hearing you saying that you would like this. These are really good ways to just kind of cover yourself as well as the person taking on the job, and to show that you're genuinely engaged and not distracted by the things around them. This is really important if you're in a conversation where you can't actually do a FaceTime. It's very hard to get a lot of things via the phone as far as body language, tone, even just what the person looks like. So if you're in a situation where you can't meet in person, maybe the internet goes out while you're in the middle of talking and you have to relegate this to a phone or email conversation, those questions and listening and repeating back are even more important, because you'll really absorb a lot of things that may not be coming out directly when you speak with them one-on-one. Okay. So this one is huge, and I have a personal story that I can share from being a client on the side of photography and videography, and that is building trust. When I was, we'll say, 15 years ago, when I did my first photo shoot, I was very nervous in front of the camera. I had always been someone behind the scenes, and I had to do headshots for my company at the time, and a friend connected me with this photographer, and she was a couple years older than me, like had a really great energy about her, and just had this way of making me feel myself. I wasn't thinking about the fact there was a camera on me. I just felt like I was hanging out with a friend. And in those moments, she got probably some of the most authentic photos I had ever had, that to this day, I still look back on and say, like, that's me. That's the exact person I wanted her to capture. And we started building this relationship, and I sent friends to her. I used her for future work. My cousin got married. She was the photographer for her wedding. My brother got married last year, mid-pandemic. We had to shift the whole wedding. He was supposed to get married abroad. Last minute, I called her and said, listen, we're having, a small ceremony. We'd love someone to capture it. Can you be there? This is now almost 15 years I've been using the same photographer for all important milestones in my life. And I think it's the same when it comes to hiring someone to capture video, whether it's corporate or personal. If you're trying to get someone to go out and do more landscape photography, somebody that's going to really understand how you see the world and the kind of beauty and the color and the palette and all of that you're capturing. And that all stems from trust. It's knowing if I say that I want this to this person, they're going to go out and they're going to get exactly what my vision is. And that's very hard to do from your side. However, the more you build trust with that client, the more they're going to understand that even if you don't capture exactly what they had in their head, you're going to capture the best and most authentic version of what they were looking for. And those lasting relationships, I mean, this business, like so many, is based on word of mouth. And particularly now, people are going to go online, they're going to Google. A lot of people have shifted careers. A lot of people have moved into freelance work because they were laid off. So the competition is stiffer now. So you really need those trustworthy moments with your clients to continue moving forward. With that, I would say, and this is going to be a little down the line, but you want to focus on getting testimonials when you do have those moments, because those are the people who you absolutely blew away and were like, you're my photographer, you're my videographer for life. They're the ones that are going to keep coming back. They're the ones that are going to refer you to their friends. And they're the ones you want on your website and your social media talking about how amazing you are and tagging you in their photos and resharing your work. Sorry, I'm multiple screens here. Speaking of, be seen beyond the screen. So now we're in this world where everything's digital. We're pretty much communicating with people through our social media, through our website, through our LinkedIn. You've got to get creative with the way that you're being seen. And a way to get more creative and to be a bit more visible and to be seen when you're having these conversations is to actually, and I say this in a joking but also serious way, so do a little bit of light stalking before you have your first meeting with your client. So part of being prepared is going into the meeting with your questions, knowing what information you need to get, know how you're going to build a relationship, how you're going to listen and repeat back to them what you need, how you're going to build trust with this client. But you also have to know this client and what kind of makes them tick before you go in. So first of all, you avoid any sort of awkward conversation that could lead down the wrong path. And secondly, you have something to connect with them over that could be a conversation starter. Most people these days, if they don't have a public Instagram, you might be able to find them on a LinkedIn. You may be able to find their Twitter. You may be able to see their Facebook page. You want to just get a sense of the kind of stuff they're interested in. Are they world travelers? Did they just take a huge trip to Europe last summer? Well, before all this happened. Do they love animals? Do they have a really cute dog that you can be like, oh, I had this sort of dog growing up? Do they have children? Are they people that like to go out to eat a lot? Are they into food and wine? What a lot of people will share these interests on their social media, on their websites. And these are great ways to kind of start talking points without it necessarily looking like you've been stalking them online. So finding something that resonates with maybe a project you've already done before, maybe you can bring up something that you shot or share select photos that you think may resonate with them based on the stuff that you've seen they're interested in. But you have to find a way for them to not just have a moment with you in this scenario, one-on-one where you're pitching, but where they want to learn more about you afterwards. So find that way to connect with them, find that conversation starter, find that, oh, me too moment, and then let them go to you beyond just what you're saying on the screen to them or on the phone with them or in your proposal or, God willing, soon enough in person as well. So find your way to connect with these people beyond just what they're getting in that moment. Other ways that you can do that are Googling keywords once you get into their website. So seeing if you can search certain things. Check their tagged photos to see if there's other stuff that have, maybe events. Sometimes if you're referred to a client by another client, you can refer to something, whether it was a party or a corporate gathering or something that you shot outside of the home. So really utilize the resources you have. I mean, the internet is a huge, huge place. And especially now with so many people having been locked in their homes for the last year, I think that there's been a lot of reflecting back on times that were really important to them that they're missing now. And you can kind of get a sense of how you can use that to show them how they're going to really connect with the work that you're going to do. So the next one, mind your P's and Q's, but never forget your R's. So this is really important because it's going to be an uphill battle always when you're working freelance. You'll have months that you are killing it in the game and you don't have an hour free to breathe. And then you may have 2 months where no clients come in and nothing happens and you're like praying for the next job to come through. So resilience is a huge one. You know, there's going to be a lot of rejection in the industry. There's going to be a lot of jobs you don't get. There's going to be a lot of anxiety waiting to find out if you did or you didn't. So really finding that resilience and being able to follow up, accept defeat when it doesn't happen, and use that to make your pitch better for the next time. Being resourceful goes back to what I just said earlier about doing your research, finding creative ways to get a bit of information before you go into your pitch, finding different ways to get other people to talk about your work. So maybe you do a promotion where you tag 4 clients and say reshare and tag 3 more people and get people talking. Use social media if you're using it, which I'm assuming most people are in photo and video, as a conversation starter. Don't just post about you, but ask people questions, share stories when you're talking about an event, not just I shot this wedding or I shot this event or I did this portrait, but who's the person behind the portrait? What made them so special and so beautiful to shoot? And include that when you're promoting yourself because it makes it about your clients and not about you. And along with that, being reliable. Reliability is huge. It's obviously a very tough world when day to day we don't know what's going to happen next. And we're not only dealing with our own personal lives, but also with people's lives around us, and a lot of things are out of our control. So the only thing that you can really control is yourself and how you react to things. And being someone that's reliable, that's trustworthy, that's going to show up when they say they are to the best of their ability, or if God forbid something happens, being able to communicate that effectively. I think right now having a plan B in place is pretty crucial to your pitch. So if they say to you, what if this happens during your pitch presentation, you have an answer. So if they're concerned, what if this shuts down? Will I get my money back? One of the big issues I know that I've seen happen on both the client and the photography side and the videography side is asking for money up front, being willing to refund that money, know what terms you're willing to refund that money over. If it's something out of the client's control, will they get the money back, or is it a non-refundable deposit? Under no circumstances. Be very honest up front, even if it means maybe losing the client, because if you lose the client over being upfront about any money in the initial pitch, you're probably saving yourself a headache down the road, whether it's going to be chasing for money or dealing with people who want their money back. It's always a difficult conversation to have because we obviously want to land that gig when we're going in for the pitch, but particularly now with all these factors and variables up in the air, I think it's really important to know what your protocol is. They're going to ask you how you deal with health and safety. They're going to ask you all of those questions, and just be ready. Maybe have a separate PDF you put together that you submit with all of your pitches so they know exactly where you stand, what you do to take health and safety precautions for yourself and your team. What are the possible circumstances and how do you handle them in the aftermath? I think, as I said, right now it's crucial to kind of approach every pitch with a best and worst case scenario just to cover yourself from all angles. And if you haven't done that already, talk to maybe other colleagues in your industry who have had experiences and find out how they handled it and use that for yourself moving forward. So this is my favorite rule, and this is the one that I usually conclude with. And it is, you are a unicorn. It's very simple. It's very basic. But it kind of sums it up. You have to go into your pitch with the attitude and the mindset that you are the only person who can do this job for them. And you're going to bring something to them that no one else has ever brought. good ways to set this up for yourself ahead of time. As I mentioned earlier, testimonials are great. Get clever with your testimonials. Maybe it's not just a quote that you put on your website, but maybe you film a few clients right after you do your shoot for them and ask them to just kind of give you a 15 to 30-second feedback on what their experience was like. And if they say really nice things, that's a great thing to have to share on your social media and on your website, and maybe even in a pitch proposal. Like, if you don't believe me, check with these people and they'll be able to confirm. It's a great way to go forward. It's a great way to follow up. But make sure you capture it in the moment, because people are going to give the most excitement and authenticity and genuine response right after you've just made them feel so amazing and done such a great job for them. If you wait too long, they have time to reflect on things. You come back a week later, maybe they've had a bad week at work, and they're not going to give you that same instant reaction that you're going to get when you actually do the job for them. So if you've worked with a client and they're really happy, either if you're more comfortable doing it written, submit a survey that's optional that they can fill out. If they were really comfortable in front of the camera, particularly if it's like a corporate event or if it's something more personal like a wedding or a birthday party or a portrait where you're getting people versus like nature shoots and things out where you don't have the actual like human interaction necessarily, capture that, because real people respond to real people, and that's essentially free promotion for you. It's stuff you can build into future pitches, and it's genuine, and people will get that. They'll know that you didn't just set up some staged a little commercial, and they'll see that when they're looking you up and doing their research on you. But beyond that, things that make you unique. So people know that you're a photographer, videographer, you're a creative type, because that's why they're reaching out to speak with you and to hire you. So what else do you bring to the table that makes you really unique? And make sure people know that right off the bat. And I don't mean walk in and just start talking about yourself, but present yourself in a way that when people look you up online, when people speak with you via email or on the phone, there's something about you that's going to stand out to them and stick with them beyond just that meeting. And it kind of circles back to what I said in the beginning about pitching equaling passion and trying to find all of that energy within it. But beyond that, your goal in this entire process is to not only land the job and the client, but to find different ways to connect with people that will then spread like wildfire throughout your community and your clients. Part of it is also knowing what your big picture goals are. And that's not something that you need to present in your pitch, but knowing in the back of your head. So just as we wrote down in the beginning of this presentation, what are 3 unique adjectives about you that you know you're bringing to the table? What do you want big picture out of your career? Are you starting as a photographer but hope to go as a portrait photographer but hope to go into some sort of landscape? Are you looking to shift from photo to video? Knowing where you are at different stages of your career and how you're going to speak to people about that in the conversation, it humanizes you and it makes you one of them. And everybody can connect to having goals and dreams and ambitions of what they would like out of life, understanding where they came from, how you got into this industry in the first place. Did you pick up a camera when you were 3 and knew this was it? Or did you change careers and go from working in finance to a completely creative freelance lifestyle when you were 45? And those are the things that are part of your story. And your story is what is part of your pitch, even if you're not directly sharing that story. So above everything else, all of these things are hugely important. Finding those bonds, building these relationships, having passion in what you're bringing to the table, being prepared, especially in today's climate, with all of the different variables we have rolling around at any given time. But at the heart of it, being yourself and being able to connect with people on that level is going to be huge for you moving forward, because it will follow you wherever you go. And that's even more important than your online trail, which is also important. But knowing that the word of mouth that's going to follow you is going to help land you more and more clients and connect with more and more people down the road. And then at that point, it doesn't become pitching and worrying about selling yourself. You're going into these meetings as a conversation to connect with a future client who you're going to build a long-term relationship with. Or if it's a one-off job, they're going to help you build a long-term relationship with somebody else. So that is pretty much my main points with my presentation. Here's a little bit of information where you can find me to connect with me if you have any further questions beyond our Q&A, or if you want to ask me about anything specifically that I spoke about in the presentation that needed more clarification, or you maybe aren't comfortable bringing up in the chat room. But I'm going to open up the chat room. Just give me one moment. Okay, so we have a few coming through, and I am going to just minimize my screen so I can do two things at once. So we're going to move into the Q&A portion. I will read out loud the questions so that the audience can also hear as well what we're discussing. The first question we have here is from Emily, and she asked, has there ever been a pitch where you were convinced you wouldn't win, but you did? If so, what do you think swung it in your favor? So to be honest, I think any pitch that I've ever gotten that swung in my favor had almost nothing to do with the pitch that I was presenting and more about my connection with that person. I come from a background where I'm a writer and a producer, which I probably should have let out with give you a bit of my background, but I'm a former business owner. So I owned a dance studio for 5 years. I have worked as a journalist. I've worked as a producer for film and video. I've worked as a screenwriter, and pretty much every job that I've ever gotten, in addition to whatever I presented as my pitch and my portfolio, has been because I really clicked with the person who I was connecting with. And I have had plenty of moments, a lot of anxiety over not getting the job, a lot of sleepless nights waiting for the phone call, whether I did or didn't. And at the end of the day, most people who have hired me that I was kind of on the fence about, it came down to them feeling that they really trusted me and that I brought something different to the conversation than what that they had had with other people. And a lot of that came from me being very honest. I have a mindset that, you know, honesty is the best policy, not necessarily to an extent where you're oversharing, but I think that when people see you, as I mentioned earlier, as a human, that they find that vulnerability in you and they feel comforted by it because they realize that you're just another person like them. And that, I would say, has always been what kind of swung the ball in my favor, is that I treat my potential pitches and my clients like they're just other people, and I really want to find out about them as that, versus looking at them as a paycheck or as somebody that I'm just trying to sell myself to. I'm very, very attentive and aware of making it about them. So that's my best advice, is even though it's hard because a lot of times we're like, it's been a slow month or a slow year and we really need this gig, you'll have a happier, healthier relationship with the client moving forward if you approach it in that way. So I hope that helps. I don't know if there's any other questions yet. I think also, actually, I'll follow that up with the preparedness is also something that's really helped swing things in my favor. I always go into a meeting over-researched, over-prepared from a presentation standpoint, and I try to make sure that there's nothing that I'm bringing to the table that they're going to question my reliability or question my professionalism, which is a big thing as well. I make sure I'm dressed. Like, even if I'm doing a Zoom call, I make sure that I'm dressed. I don't show up in my pajamas or like just coming in from a run. I've been on calls. I've actually interviewed with people on the other side of that where I got all ready and then, they came on the camera with, still sweating and toweling themselves off from a run outside. And for me, on the other side of it, I kind of felt like they didn't value the meeting with me enough. So that was something that I think is particularly important now when we're not necessarily meeting outside of our house. Have a space carved out, have a designated room, something behind you. I'm actually speaking from a hotel room right now, which is not my normal space. But even within the hotel room, I tried to find something that had a pleasant background, so it wasn't like a kitchen or a bed. It's not always the case, but even if you could just find a blank wall where you are, maybe throw a plant in the shot with you, something that kind of speaks to an aesthetic that's going to connect with your potential pitch, and maybe even be a conversation starter. I know there was a period of time during the pandemic that I was pitching a lot, and I was staying at this apartment that had a lot of plants. And that was always the first thing that people would say when we would start a Zoom call, like, oh, you have so many plants around. It's so pretty. It's so light. It's so airy. And it just kind of lightened the mood a bit. So I think now you have to be a bit creative with what they're seeing, their first impressions, and how you can impart that on them so it makes things a little bit easier. Let's see if there's any more questions. Oh, okay. We got another one. How long does it take you to prep? And would you give any recommendation on what to prioritize if a quick turnaround? Prepping, depending on how far out I'm given the notice from the client, I usually would say I try to spend like 2 hours prepping. Something that I like to do to prep if it's like a big client and I'm a bit nervous or rusty or maybe haven't presented in a bit is actually pre-record myself. So I'll either do it as a video presentation if I know I'm going to be presenting via Zoom or maybe even meeting in person, or sometimes just using a voice note on my phone. It's good to time yourself to make sure you don't kind of ramble on and on and on, and that you're not going off track when you're pitching. It's also just good to hear how you speak. You know, I know even for me, there's certain phrases that I use a lot when I'm presenting, or words that I'm trying to remove from my vocabulary. And when I hear myself present it, it's a lot easier than to realize like, okay, I need to watch how many times I shouldn't be saying literally, or I shouldn't be saying, or the word like. And we all have our different kind of quirks that we're used to in more casual conversation. So the more you record yourself and see and hear what you sound like when you're presenting to a client, the more comfortable you'll be when you actually go into the presentation. And as far as a quick turnaround goes, I would say prioritize your contract. So if you want to land this client, I would have the next step should be, these are my terms. I require X amount as a deposit just to hold the date and the spot. That way, people tend to respond better when they have money on the line. So getting that deposit, getting something signed, showing that they're legitimate and they're not going to flake on you is really important. Then beyond that, you can start getting into creative control. So I like to do sort of a deposit holding number that they're in, and this job's going to happen. Then I like to kind of sandwich it with some creativity talk. Send me some more links of what you're looking for, or something that you have seen that you really loved, and so I can start putting together a bit of a lookbook. You can use, sometimes I've used things like Pinterest to put together kind of like a little mood board, or maybe you have your own mood board, stuff that you use for your presentations. So I like to kind of sandwich the contract and the money talk with creativity in the center, because it kind of softens the blow of just feeling like you went super into business mode, but it also protects you from a work standpoint of making sure you're not giving a lot of time to a client who is then going to flake on you, which has also happened to me. And I mean, I've gone as far as early in my career, like booking trips to go up and meet with clients, and then they bailed on me 24 hours before, and I had no deposit down to kind of compensate for my time. So I like to do a little sandwich now. Money contract, creativity, money contract. Let's see, anybody else? Okay. How confident should you come across when pitching? I would say very confident, but there's a very fine border between confidence and arrogance. That's where actually presenting ahead of time is good for you, because you can hear yourself. And if you sound a little bit like too confident, I don't really think you could be too confident when talking about your work. I think it's how you talk about it. If you talk about it in a lot of ways where you're using, I did this, I did that, it can get a bit, it's all about you. Like I said earlier, you really want it to be about them, but you still want to come across as somebody who knows what they're talking about, who's had experience. Maybe share a few similar stories. If they tell you they are looking for you to shoot X, Y, and Z, and you shot something very similar within the last year, you can tell them about that experience. You want them to trust you, and they will trust you with a level of confidence. But you also don't want to put people off by seeming like you are the expert and you know better. So making them feel comfortable is just as important as being confident, but you absolutely always want to have a level of confidence in what you're doing because you do. You have belief in yourself, you have belief in your work. That's why you're pitching yourself for this project. And you probably know you're the best person for this job, but you've got to find a way to make that come across as something that they're almost discovering for themselves, that not that you're telling them you're the best person for this job, if that makes sense. Okay, John, with treatments, when you pitch, did you find how many pages, levels of detail to go into, what works best and isn't going to be too much or drop engagement? I say less is more. I personally like to get people in conversations. I think your pitch, the actual treatment itself, depending on what you're pitching, obviously video is going to be different from photography. If you're storyboarding it, for example, if it's a video that's scripted, you want to give them a sense of the mood, the tone, a little director's statement. I would say in the beginning, don't go beyond like 5 to 10 pages. People lose interest. Try not to have too many words on the page. People don't like to read. It's a very tragic time for people who are writers, and I can speak that from experience. You want to get them as visually stimulated in the shortest period of time. And you want them to still have a little bit of a question, but intrigued enough in your presentation that they're buying into wanting to go with you as their direct hire. So I would say have your world mapped out, but then also have a few things that will be talking points for you, and make sure that when you're sending that presentation, you're letting them know, here is my vision for this. I had a few thoughts, would love to have a conversation with you after you look it over, so that then kind of gets their gears going with what sort of questions they're going to have for you after they see the presentation. But yeah, I would say, I mean, unless you absolutely have to, try to keep it to no more than 5 to 10 pages. Keep the information like your bio and, that sort of written stuff to a minimum. They're going to research you and look you up if they want to know more, or they'll ask you directly. Okay, any more questions? I think that might be it, and we're almost out of time. If there's any more, you can sneak them through. And as I mentioned, you're welcome to also personally email me if you have any questions, if you want to chat about anything. I'm on Instagram mostly and LinkedIn. I have a website, which is christinamorelli.com. You can contact me there. I have a contact form as well. But otherwise, it's been lovely chatting with you. I wish I could see all of your faces because I do miss that. And I hope some of these tips will be helpful as you move forward. But yes, I would definitely say, based on some of the questions that you've just presented, confidence is key, being prepared is key, connecting with people is key, and your work will speak for itself. So worry about who you are as a person and what you're bringing to the table. And especially nowadays, I think it's really nice that we're able to connect with people. I mean, I'm presenting to you from Los Angeles, and last year or 2 years ago, I was presenting to you from Birmingham, and we can still connect on that same level. So utilize this time and the fact that you can reach a much wider audience to your advantage, and find ways to connect with them on that, using sensitivity to the fact that, we've all gone through quite a year. So I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy out where you are. And as I said, feel free to reach out to me. I'm just going to do one more refresh and make sure we don't have any more questions I missed. Oh, one more. What has been your favorite job secured from a successful pitch? I guess last year I had a TV series, or 2 years ago, I had a TV series that went into a shopping agreement right before the pandemic hit. That was a huge moment for me. But unfortunately didn't happen because of COVID. But it did give me the confidence that I had a presentation on a project that would move forward, and it was based on not only the script, but also the pitch presentation that I had given. So that's been so far the highlight. Hopefully there'll be more, though, now as we're starting to get back into the world again. Have a wonderful Sunday, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and I will hopefully hear from some of you soon.